Hello.
Good evening, Anthony, and good evening, Graham, as we
Hello, Charles.
reconvene a week on from our Edinburgh experiences that finished last Monday, a week ago today. And
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that our Edinburgh experience was maybe one of our best ever, actually. Um,
it was just like being there 30 years ago
yeah.
when we were 30 years younger. It felt pretty similar, except I didn't do anything stupid, really.
No, that's true. Well, you say that, but let's just recall perhaps the one moment where you introduced yourself to Gaspar Noé, the Argentinian director. And how did that go, Graham?
Well, on stage the day before, in front of 350 people, being Q&A'd about his films, which include The Notorious Irreversible, because he's lived in France for a long time. Well, he looked like the sort of guy you wouldn't trust to look after your best interests at a party. For fear of where you would end up
Yes,
at his expense. And he looked quite a tough character. So
you did.
when I attempted to tell him how much I enjoyed his film Lux Eterna, he basically stared at me like he was about to knife me and told me to clear off.
He went
So
from Gaspar Noé to Gaspar Annoyed, didn't he? Very quickly, didn't he?
I was
Maybe that's a bit unfair, but he gave
exasperated.
you a
It,
look.
it was it was exasperating.
Well, we'll come on to encounters in Edinburgh, which is always one of our joyful experiences there. Spotting who we see and conversations we have up there. Um, we primarily go for the film festival, and this time Edinburgh International Film Festival, 77th iteration of that festival. I think the longest running film festival of its kind in Great Britain, a festival of
In
huge
the world.
significance in the world.
Actually, in the world,
In the world,
continuously running. I think it's the world 1947
yeah.
it started.
And so, even I mean, this year we're going to reflect on what we think was a really, really special film festival. Even this year's bag, beautifully designed, that amber with the amber and black together, and then the figure of EIFF and the figure of 77. All that, even that, seemed to me to be a lift up from recent times. And we bumped into Paul Ridd, the new director and indeed chief executive as well. So two posts, a busy man and a man with whom one would only be able to have brief conversations. But in those conversations, we imparted to him just how much we'd enjoyed this year's festival. And I think it was, as we predicted in advance, a festival that was going to be memorable. He made a very good impression on everybody, I think, this year. And so he tended to introduce and then hand over the role to others to do, particularly for the talks that took place. So,
He
it wasn't
wasn't.
one to
Yeah.
sort of play the I am the new star director or whatever.
No, no,
Low key,
he was inspirational.
no,
He created an inspirational film festival,
he
but
did.
he himself as a personality was not
Yeah,
inspirational. He was businesslike. He knew what he
yeah,
was doing with a lot of experience high up
yeah,
in the Pitch House chain, a lot of experience at British Film Institute and London Film Festival. And
yeah.
I think that because he knew exactly what he was doing and had all the great contacts, it was just high quality from start to finish. And there was so many young people there. The audiences were much better than they've been the last 10 years or more. It was really buzzing. It was alive again. It was supposed to be a revival, and it was revived.
They kept referring to it as the relaunched Edinburgh Film Festival, and I think that absolutely lived up to that. Part of that, I think we both feel, is that using what could only be described as a classic traditional film house, which was the Cameo, part of the Picture House chain. And so it was like going back to film festivals of the past, but also just the old-fashioned film going experience. And I think that helped as well because it had the sense of a hub about it and a hubbub to go with being the hub. And
Well,
so that side of
for
it went very well as well. And looking at the Cameo staff, they really seem to be enjoying their involvement within it as well. And I thought that was significant too.
Yeah,
The
well,
other
the thing
time,
about the Edinburgh Film Festival is for people who are true cinema fans.
yes,
Usually
cinephiles.
international cinema fans,
Yeah.
not just British or American. And it had no place, even though I personally enjoy going to Everyman Cinema, and I don't
Mm.
mind going to multiplexes.
No,
They don't have the right atmosphere
no.
for true film aficionados. And we
Mm.
met so many young people this year who knew more about films than we do, even though we've been going for like 35, 40 years, which is just like it used to be. I mean,
Yeah.
in the 90s and early noughties, you could bump into someone and have a chat about Jean-Luc Godard who you never met in your life, and they know what they're talking about. And it was
Mm.
back to that again. You could
Mm.
feel the love for films and the knowledge.
Part of the joy of it this year as well, Graham, and we'll come on to perhaps talk about some of the films in a moment. But the venue that was, I think, new to me to being involved in the festival was Central Hall, very near the Cameo, and
The
we
Tall
attended,
Cross.
yeah, Toll Cross, and we attended two talks overall. I think we're right in thinking in that venue, as well as a further talk as part of the book festival that Mark Cousins took part in. And as Graham says, the age of audience very diverse, young, informed enthusiasts. One of whom we sat next door to, who's involved in film studies in Edinburgh, already writes film reviews, etc., etc. And the first of those talks was with Gaspar Noé, Graham mentioned, which takes us right back to the start of this discussion. And a fascinating discussion with him about his work, certain revelations. Graham, I think you might wish to reflect on
Well,
what the
I
filmmaking
le I
techniques, a
learned
little
I
unconventional.
learned yeah, I learned two things about Gaspar Noé when it comes to filmmaking from that Q&A, which was massively well attended. Was that first of all, he busks it and he's a chancer, and he
Mm,
thinks on his feet and he improvises, and he doesn't do too much work in advance, and
no.
that's why he can shoot his films so quickly, because he does it on the hop, because he's such a fizzing, energetic ideas person that he can do it, and he pulls it off. The other thing I learned was that he doesn't mind taking drugs on the set, which, if you were a British filmmaker admitted to taking drugs while you were shooting a film, you'd possibly never be given a budget ever again in your entire life.
No.
But since
No.
he lives in France and he's Argentinian and he's notoriously famous in the film community,
Mm,
obviously this is not an issue. This is not a problem.
no.
But my jaw nearly dropped when he's talking about taking MDMA during the filming of some of his biggest films.
I think it was
I thought,
irreversible, wasn't it? That
yeah,
he mentioned it. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been Out of the Void. I can't
Oh
quite
yeah.
remember.
Yes, it could have been.
But
Yeah.
Vincent Cassel, the brilliant French actor, was also involved with this, as well as most other people. And I just thought, this is just incredible stuff. I can't believe he's telling this, but he seemed to be a fearless man, and he
Yeah.
actually claimed to have calmed down and slowed down. And I thought, good grief, this is a calmed down version. God knows what the full on version was like.
There was a moment where he was asked about whether he was a rebel, or the interviewer assumed that he was a rebel, and he corrected the interviewer straight away. I'm not a rebel. Maybe his films are interpreted as the act of a rebel, but it's very interesting. He doesn't see himself as being a rebel filmmaker. I think that's why actually events like this are so revealing and fascinating to have in film festivals, where you get to hear a director firsthand expressing his beliefs retrospectively about his career, what he's done so far, and what may lay ahead. So, to me, probably more than the films, his discussion, Gaspar Noé's discussion, and then the second of the discussions, again at Central Hall, with the filmmaker Alex Garland, also, of course, a familiar name from novels that he's written, and indeed from television work, and indeed going to be a revelation that was made that is going to continue the 28 days stroke years series is going to now be a trilogy, a new trilogy. So that was a revelation. So his talk, Alex Garland's talk, was involved
Andrew
with Andrew
McDonald.
McDonald. Tell us,
Andrew
Graham, a
McDonald,
little
yeah.
bit about Andrew McDonald and the background to that talk.
Well, apart from being the producer of Train Spotting and 20 Days Later and Alex Garland's recent film Civil War, he's also now a chief mover in the revival at Edinburgh National Film Festival. He's on the
Yes.
board. So he's really committed to Edinburgh. And we first met him in the flesh at Edinburgh Film Festival. about 94, just after Shallow Grave, when he was a
Yeah.
fresh-faced youth, and we were nearly fresh-faced youths. And he was a really nice guy. But now he seems slightly wiser and older, and very much cautious compared to Alex Garland, who seemed to be quite happy to tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Whereas Andrew played the diplomat to Alex's, big mouth. And it was a fascinating conversation, and it made me understand more about Civil War, because I thought Civil War was a brilliantly directed film and really gripping, but I could not work out the point. And I was going to ask Alex Garland what the point of the film was in the Q&A, but sadly, 3 times during the Q&A, he mentioned how much he hated journalists who didn't understand the meaning of Civil War. And he got more and more annoyed about journalists as he was saying this. And I thought, I'm not going to ask him that question, because he's already said, because he claims it has got a point, and it's got a clear point. And then he said a bit later on that when he was influenced was J.G. Ballard. And I suddenly started to realise what effect this has on his filmmaking, because since we were at Edinburgh only last week, I've watched Ex Machina, which he made with Andrew McDonald producing in 2014. It's got Oscar Isaac and Alicia Vikander and Donald Gleason, and it's about AI generated robots, very sort of like ideas driven film, but also it's almost lacking it's lacking a sort of emotional curve. It's quite not quite cold, but it's a bit dry. As is Civil War, it's like, where's the emotion in this? And I realize it's because he's heavily influenced by J.G. Ballard, who doesn't, apart from Empire of the Sun, his autobiography, he doesn't put emotion in his novels. He just lets it lie there. And you, if you want to bring emotion to it, you can, but that's not what it's about. And I realized that Alex Garland, he makes films in a way which you might not think he's making a point because of the style he borrows from Ballard. But at the time, I thought, what's he doing? What is Civil War about?
It was an interesting contrast, wasn't it, between Alex Garland, revelation after revelation, and quite mischievous, really, in the way that he talked. But maybe mischievous is the wrong word. I mean, very strongly opinionated. Initially, had an air of being maybe even grumpy or whatever, but very much warmed into the interview. And he kind of tried to get Andrew McDonald to open up about certain things, about whether they'd fallen out or when they had fallen out, and he just would, and McDonald stay completely guarded. And you kind of saw the different role between the filmmaker and the force putting the whole thing together, making sure that it gets made, money-wise coming together, bringing all the talent together, etc., etc. You saw how the differing roles can combine in filmmaking. And that was, I think, as much a part of the revelation of anything with the talk, wasn't it?
It was fascinating. It was a bit like Lennon McCartney, and Andrew McDonald was McCartney, and Alex Garland was Lennon. And the bits that Alex Garland might fall foul of because of his personality were compensated entirely by the opposing bits of Andrew McDonald. So you could see how they'd worked together as a great team. And one thing that was really interesting as well about the whole conversation was that they like to use a small budget, and Ex Machina in particular has quite a small budget. You can tell because it only has 3 major characters and the rest are not moving very much. And the reason for that, they say, is because once you get above a certain level of funding, you start to lose control of the film, and they like to control their own films. So when they were once offered for their standards quite a big budget, they actually turned it down and asked for a smaller budget, which is quite extraordinary. Most filmmakers would kill for a bigger budget, but they said, no, we don't want that. We will do it for our cheaper price.
So in many ways, I think the talks that we went to were probably the most revealing and enjoyable aspect of the festival. But we saw plenty of films. One of the things that we made sure to, each day we got there, well, just about on time for a series of 9 o'clock screenings, which took us back again to the old days of the film festival, when there were proper amounts of film screenings each day. We started with that.
Well, yeah, we'd see 5 films.
We started seeing the films on the Thursday morning. And we always kind of look for connecting themes through a festival. There was an awful lot of death that we saw.
Yeah, well, death sells. I mean, it's the biggest seller in newspapers, and it's quite a big topic for films and for literature.
And maybe,
Has
I
to be
mean, I
said.
put that idea, Graham, to you that maybe also in the shadow of COVID, even more so now, films being made about death.
Well, yeah, we're also living through a fairly non-positive era, quite a negative era. So, gloomy's in.
Yeah. And sort of different interpretations of death. I mean, from the point of view of, as we're based in Yorkshire, maybe we can mention two films of Yorkshire connection that we're showing. The first of which takes its name from my old school, Radley, but it's actually The Radleys, a
Mm.
story partly filmed in Whitby. And of course, it's a film about a vampire family, a modern vampire family. So, how do they deal with death? Is the theme within that, starring Damien Lewis in not one but two roles, and Kelly MacDonald, the Scottish actress, as well as the parents, and then their two children. And again, huge, not a huge budget, but obviously death dominated that film. And then we saw one more Yorkshire-based film. Interestingly, this was as part of what's going to be next year's City of Culture in Bradford. And this funding of the film is partly through that. And it's a film, if my memory serves me right, called The Ceremony.
Yeah.
And it was a film, so it's a film rooted in Bradford, rooted in the illegal immigrant population working at a car wash, and two different cultures coming into play there. One from, I think, Romania, wasn't it, Graham? Where was
No,
the other
it was
community from?
Iran. So
Iran.
it was migrant
And
workers coming together, and the
yeah,
cultural clash between the two of them,
yeah,
Romanian and Iranian, was the beginning of the film. But the film then turned into an entirely different film,
yes,
where the two characters then went off having to deal with the sudden death of another character
yeah,
into the clearly Yorkshire Dales, and had to try and do something with the body, and how that story unfolded became a sort of like philosophical journey
yeah.
for all concerned. And the great thing about the ceremony, which went on to win the new Sean Connery Prize at the film festival last week in Edinburgh, is that almost all British made films set in the North or set in Yorkshire are
Mm,
gritty
mm,
in a sort of like slightly bleak, horrible fashion.
yeah,
And this was gritty, but the black and white cinematography in the visuals
mm,
by debut director Jack King were so well judged and so quietly beautiful that rather than getting annoyed or bored watching this dark drama unfold in the moorlands in Yorkshire,
mm,
it was actually beautiful to look at, which
yeah,
actually gave you some aesthetic pleasure. So
yeah.
it was a rare Yorkshire set British film that had a great aesthetic sense, as well as being perfectly scripted with a perfectly judged tone
Mm.
and a really nice ending. So I was really impressed by the ceremony.
You had a preference for this film over um, the film. I think, was it called In God's Country, or I think it was called
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Which
That was the one.
which had plenty of attention when that came out. Just to remind everyone, it was an early film for Josh O'Connor, set in a farming community where, again, very bleak representations of Yorkshire in the tradition of the Wuthering Heights type scenery. But what do you think made the ceremony a superior film?
It was so sparse. There wasn't any dialogue that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
No scene went on too long. It didn't dwell in personal drama for the sake of pretending it was some sort of theatrical play. There
Mm,
was nothing. There was no acting that didn't serve the purpose of the overall film. It wasn't looking to, tick any boxes or impress anybody. It was like a poem. It was just like perfectly formed.
I think we were
And
both
also it
struck.
had beauty. It had beauty. It had beauty and
Yeah,
light. And the
yeah,
thing about Yorkshire, as you know, is that depending on the weather, Yorkshire can be dazzlingly beautiful
yeah,
or quite grim, but it can
yeah.
be both on the same day. And for films made in Yorkshire just to portray the uglier sides of Yorkshire, I think betray the nature of the county.
I think we were both struck by the religious imagery in the piece as well. two different faiths within it. And interestingly, again, the way the director used that focus, the Romanian had a symbol, I think from memory, of a cross on his left arm, a tattoo. And in a brief moment, the Iranian finds a little shining symbol of Allah, and the way that glinted in that moment. I mean, again, that was a beautiful piece of direction. It didn't need any comment. It just summed up the power for that person. As it turns out,
No, but
this
yeah,
was on the dead body. You know, the symbolism of that faith as well.
yeah,
I thought it was very
you're right.
significant the way they dwelt on the two symbols
Yeah,
of religion with the different
it
faiths.
it wasn't really about religion. It wasn't about organized religion. It was about personal salvation, and the religion could have been anybody's religion
Yeah,
or any sort of beliefs. It was about
yeah,
personal salvation and dealing with the sort of like trials and tribulations of living
yeah.
in a tough world. So
Mm.
the religion was a part of it, and it did have religious iconography.
Yeah.
Really, it was much more personal than that. So I really rated it. I preferred it to the Radleys with Damien Lewis,
Yes.
even though the Radleys was a good script and a good idea based on a sort of satirical, dark sitcom about a
Mm.
family who are dysfunctional, who all turn out to be vampires, and how they try to live with the modern world while still being a vampire. That was all really enjoyable, but it didn't have the. It was like a really nice cake without the icing and the cherry. It just needed a little twist extra to pep it up, and it didn't quite get to the pepped up point. It was like the bones of a great film without totally the flesh. But Damien Lewis was good in it. I nearly caught him at the Pleasance in Edinburgh on the Monday night when I was meeting David Bowen, the chief executive of Harrogate Theatre, because he
Ah,
turned up with his children just for a wonder. I don't know if one of
ah,
his children was
yeah,
appearing in the Fringe,
yeah.
but he was just too far away for me to say like I saw the film and I thought you're great in it. It would have been really imposing to have like just marched up to him. So I didn't bother. I thought he's come here to be a bit off duty.
Uh, in terms of the film that perhaps was least satisfying, which would you choose? I'm thinking of a
I
film.
thought it was a good film festival. Like,
Mm,
we saw 16 films. I don't
yeah.
think there's a single bad film. And whether it's Peruvian, Mexican,
Mm.
Kurdish, whatever the nationality, I didn't think we didn't see a single film where I thought, this hasn't really worked. This isn't worth watching.
You didn't feel that Anne Mrs. was, well, I think you referred to it as being one funeral and a wedding. And
Oh yeah, it
the
was Ailing B.
yeah.
That was potentially really good, but basically they took the sort of like one funeral and a wedding, or one wedding and funeral
Mm,
type idea, and they just eventually fell apart in a whole blizzard of feel good cliches
mm.
and combined with a little bit of stilted acting. So it ended up being sort of film, another British comedy which failed to really become really funny, which you'd happily watch on TV, but I wouldn't go to the cinema to watch it.
That's an interesting distinction, isn't it? It would work perfectly well there, and I'm sure it will. It was just riddled with cliches, obviously. The film probably to be getting the most attention actually was the official opening film of the festival, The Outrun, starring, well, there's myriad ways to pronounce Saoirse Ronan, an adaptation of an Amy
She can't run
Littropt
on.
book.
Mm.
And I was in the cinema this weekend to see Blake Lively's, well, less said about the end for the end. What's it called? The end is us. The end couldn't
Oh
come
yeah.
soon enough. Dreadful piece of work.
Oh
But anyway,
dear. Oh dear.
one of the prime adverts within it before it was indeed for the Outrun, which would suggest it's going to get proper coverage and a decent release imminently. It was, I guess, the talking point film of the festival because it was the film's opening event. What struck you most about that film, Graham? The setting in Scotland, the
Brilliant act.
performance of Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah. It
Saoirse,
was
I'm now
the
being, there's
acting
a
lead
shouting from the
character.
left. I'm being told
She
Saoirse.
yeah, yeah. There are different ways of pronouncing it, but I'm sure she's only got one way. But since I've
Yeah.
never talked to her, I don't know how she pronounces it. Anyway, she was fantastic from start to finish. She
Mm.
held the whole film together.
She
She's
did. She
mesmerizing.
did.
You,
Mm.
you can't stop watching her. And
Nope.
then the landscape and the seascape of the Orkneys was exceedingly well used.
Yeah.
But I felt that the landscape and the seascape of the Orkneys was used so much to distract from the fact this is actually a fairly bleak story about someone who fell into alcoholism, then eventually pulled herself out of it. I didn't quite get why she'd fall into alcoholism. I know they sort of hinted at the reasons, but
Mm.
I didn't quite understand it, and I didn't think that the spiritual aspects that were implied by the amazing Orkney setting actually in any way linked to her alcohol problem and her troubled family background. Whereas Lars von Trier's Breaking Waves
Yeah.
from like nearly 30 years ago
Yeah.
with Emily Watson, which treads slightly in similar territory, again, set in a Scottish island. The sort of imagery of the Scottish landscape and the sea fitted the emotional content of that film and the ideas of it perfectly in a way which it didn't for the Outrun. So I thought the Outrun was a good film, and I can see it's going to be pretty successful.
Yeah.
But I didn't love it.
Mm. No, I mean, it's, I think, yeah, it's you can't. I mean, alcoholism, a commercial subject. I mean, yes, the answer is that many a film has been made about the problem of alcohol. The thing with watching an alcoholic being alcoholic, it does tend to become irritating after a while. And even in a film, it can't help but do that. The show Shit-Faced Shakespeare, excuse the language briefly there, relies on one actor who we don't discover beforehand, getting gradually smashed through the day and into the performance. And it's been a huge comic hit, but what I've seen is it's become as irritating as ever to watch someone behaving in an increasingly tedious way when they're drunk. I think there will always be that dilemma of watching that in a film, even in a journey that is ultimately redemptive, as is the case here. So I think there's always something of a limitation with that. I don't think that's ever going to change, no matter how good the writing is.
Well, yeah, it's all about self-destruction.
Yeah.
But eventually it turned away from that. And it's almost like the sort of natural feeling direction of a film about self-destruction is to end up with the ultimate form of self-destruction. But of course, in this storyline, she veers away from that. But that sort of undermines the whole.
Yeah. I mean,
But then the film, I
that
thought,
was.
why did she bother being an alcoholic? I didn't. It's like, but then the film, when she turned the corner, I thought she just wasted like 10 years of her time. I know this
Well,
sounds really harsh.
I mean, maybe
but
that's.
that's
I
what I
mean,
felt.
given that it's based on Amy Liptrot's own experiences and what she went through, and it is a redemptive arc, and she does come through it. So and I don't think I don't think it's done for reasons of Hollywood cliche that she comes through it. So I think it's fair enough to show that journey. And then, as you say, the alternative path is to watch the film about the Doors or whatever. So take it that I think there's probably a commercially more appealing arc to someone having redemption. So
I
Graham,
thought they did their very best to turn a film which could have been pretty negative, and it's something so almost joyous, and something which a larger audience would find palatable to watch. So it was a good effort, and I'm sure in years to come it'll like still have a good reputation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Graham, I mean, do you have a favourite from the festival?
No, I liked the ceremony. I also liked the one about the Iranian emigres in Montreal and Canada, a shrine, which I thought was, if you forgot about the fact it was about Iranian emigre and about his shrine from which he made money in Montreal, and forgot the character was Iranian and imagined it was an American character in a Jim Jarmusch film from 1984. If that had been a Jim Jarmusch film, you would have thought it's fantastic. And I thought it was. I thought a shrine was exceedingly good.
I'm trying to remember the name of the American film that we saw, which was a kind of latter-day Woody Allen film.
Oh, that was great. But Between the Temples with Jason Schwartzman.
Between the Temples, which has had already reviewed by Kermode, and and I think that's going to be quite a successful film. I feel
it was like watching a really good 1970s comedy, possibly by Woody Allen. It just felt right. The great characters, great dialogue, good story, entertaining, but not stupid. It was just really enjoyable. Between the Temples.
And in interesting timing for a film like this, because it is a Jewish story, and it's presenting a different Jewish story to the one that's dominating the world at the moment.
Well, it was interesting because you got the whole flavor of like Jewish life around the synagogue.
Yeah.
But you didn't get any politics, which was great to see. I don't see why you need to have politics involved with everything.
That's a really astute point, Graham, wasn't it? Because it was about every other element of Jewish life, family in particular, and it was beautifully humorous. I thought it had lovely subtleties about the way it did that. I thought the character studies within it really good, performances really good. This Jason, no, are we going to get his name right?
Schwartzman. Jason Schwartzman was fantastic. I mean, if you like Wes Anderson films like the Darjeeling Limited, which was set in India with three brothers, he's in that, and he's always good. Jason Schwartzman. He's a really underrated actor.
Indeed. We might return next week because I don't know how many minutes we've got left. How many minutes have we got left, Graham? I can't see.
I think we only got about 10. I think we should leave the art galleries there.
Let's do that next week.
Which we go to till next week. But I was at Leeds Festival yesterday in the cold wind. It was like winter.
And today's putting that dreaded word 5 minutes left. Let's crack on with the other festival. Right. The festival that you attended yesterday, which has slightly been overshadowed by the Liam Gallagher announcement, which he didn't actually make it. He made it at Reading on Friday night rather than Leeds last night. But you went to Leeds Festival yesterday. You kind of went post-Storm Lillian, removing tents and removing 3 of the stages on the first day and 2 of the stages permanently on the last 2 days. But what you had been interested in seeing, and we can talk about this, Lana Del Ray, and maybe a disappointing performance, it sounds like, Graham, from your point of view.
Well, no, I saw the last dinner party. Yeah. You know, 4 women and a male drummer.
They were playing mid-afternoon, Graham.
Yeah, but they were absolutely fantastic and went down really well on the main stage.
I'm sure they would.
Because basically, they got lots of ideas, lots of tunes, combined different styles, surprise you with their twists and turns in songwriting and performing. They looked like Roxy Music from about 1972. Their dress sense was fabulous. Yeah. And I defy anybody who doesn't appreciate good music not to like Last Dinner Party. They were great. And then the Sun King from York, a 5-piece band, who were quite 1970s, but in a different way to the Last Dinner Party. They were superb, much better.
What stage were they on, Graham? Given there were so few stages,
they were on this small BBC introducing stage. But they were brilliant because they're very 1970s, like a 1970s rock band with a little bit of soul, a little bit of jazz, and although there was a 70s feel to them, they're very focused. Like they were focused in the way that the Black Crowes were in the early years before they got a bit loose. And they were just superb musicians, and it was very rich music and very enjoyable. And this was all fantastic. And then I saw Fontaines DC, who seemed to have gone all loose. I mean, Brian Chat, lead singer, was wearing a T-shirt of the Rolling Stones in Tokyo, and he was putting his arms out like he was a rock star. And he was sort of doing an Alex Turner of the Arctic Monkeys. You couldn't tell if he was trying to be a rock star or that he was taking the mickey out of how rock stars behave. Same sort of thing as Alex Turner does. And the whole band was a bit looser, and they played quite a lot of new songs from the new album. Romance was just come out. And it was like very good, but the same problems with the Fontaines DC as always. They're so intense. Can they lighten up? And there was a little bit of lightening up. So I wasn't totally sure about Fontaines DC, even though I liked them a lot. Then I saw Lana Del Ray, and I realized how brilliant Fontaines DC were. Because Lana Del Ray, it was like going to a mass mental health conference in which she was like the person with the mental health issues who was sharing her issues with a crowd who were recognizing that they also too have mental health issues. And she was basically doing a succession of dreary songs with a lot of power, but not very good tunes. and no variety in tunes. A bit like if you listen to the less tuneful aspects of The Cure's Pornography and Nothing Else over and over again. That was Lana Del Ray, which if the huge crowd who'd gathered to see her had kept quiet and if she'd behaved in a downbeat way on stage, you might have got into the dark power of this dreary succession of negative feelings. But sadly, the crowd were all yakking the whole time except for the big songs they liked. And the stage set by Lana Del Ray was absolutely ridiculous. It was screamingly over the top, screamingly artistically pretentious, and it was completely at odds with the actual music she was making. It was almost like she was trying to cover up the negative, dreary aspects of her music with something luxuriously, visually attractive. And I just got increasingly annoyed at this because she's no Roy Orbison. Roy Orbison could just stand there and sing wonderful songs, quite dark songs, but wonderfully operatic songs. And she seemed to be capable of just standing there and being a sort of modern day Roy Orbison. I don't see musically what she actually achieved very much, except to be.
I mean, there is always that thing of people chatting. It's almost inevitable at festivals that happens, and so I do wonder, maybe even with the imagery that she used with the set, would it have suited better just being her own show within a more conventional, within an interior setting, rather than as the sun's beginning to go down from 7:30.
She's a very intense performer, very intense songs. In an indoor environment, the intensity and atmosphere can build up. On a windswept hill, as the sun's setting behind the stage, and people are getting a bit cold, and they're eating their food, and they're drinking their beers, and blah,
it's the
blah,
last
blah.
night at the festival.
That intensity doesn't translate to a huge crowd watching her. She probably does this everywhere she goes. It's just probably a regular touring set and a regular touring stage show.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.